All right, looks we are at time, so let's go ahead and get started with AVW today. My name is Chinda Chun, and I'm with NACB and the Consultants Training Institute. Before we get started, I want to go over a few housekeeping items. First, to obtain CP credit, you must answer the poll questions that pop up on your screen during today's webinar. If you have a subscription to AVW for CPE, you will receive the CP credit within 7 to 10 business days. There is a link on one of the pages to obtain the subscription. So if you're interested, click on that link and proceed to purchasing that, and you'll receive the CPE for the webinars for up to a year. If you have any questions during the webinar today, please use the Q&A feature. This will be directed to the presenter. If you have any technical questions or questions about NACBA, please use the chat feature. This will also be directed to me. And with that, I'm going to turn the time over to Mel and Alina, who will get us started with the Around the Valuation World today.
Thank you, Shanda. Hello, everyone. Happy Monday, and welcome to our Around the Valuation World November edition. Today, we have an excellent lineup. As always, we have Michael Gregory. He's going to be doing industry headlines as every month. And we're going to have Ed Mofrad interviewing Alan Gorlick. They are going to be talking about interest rate volatility, so super interesting. And I'm going to have the pleasure to interview some of our younger members, and we are going to discuss multi-generational collaboration in the workplace. We're going to be talking to Ashley and Dylan, and then we're going to have Alan Zipp interviewing the judges. So great session as always, and we are going to have also Michael Kaplan discussing related topics to those. And at the end, we're going to have Mark Kucik. He's going to be talking about standards and ethics bulletin, and he's going to be talking about specifically professional standards. So now we're going to start with our first session. We're going to start with Michael Gregory. Everyone knows him in our association. He's awesome. Mike is a business valuation, mediation, and negotiation specialist with a lot of experience working with the IRS and IRS-related valuation matters and disputes. So he's going to be talking today about different topics because he's our expert doing industry headlines. So, Mike?
Well, thank you very much, Alina. It's my pleasure to be with you here today. I'll introduce to you the different things we're going to be talking about.
Thank you.
I'll start off with new Rule 702 crackdown, already impacting expert witnesses and what the impact of that might be on you and to know what that means for going into the future. There's a new app for Margrave options, an approach to DLOM. That's from Ashok Abbott, and we'll talk about that, and that you can go ahead and test this out, beta test if you'd like, and provide feedback. BizComp's being upgraded with new platforms. So they have a new platform. We'll talk about what that means and some of the implications. NACVA adds to CVA and MFF ranks. So a significant number of new folks have come on board. Clearly, it's a growing organization, and it's great to see that. BV firms are thriving per BVR's benchmark insights. And I'm confident you're probably aware of this and some of the implications with trying to hire. And then watch out for the black box on compensation apps. And there's some recommendations here of what to be cautious of when you're involved with reasonable compensation. But we start off, what are our objectives for today? We want to recognize what the implications are for the new Rule 702 on BV experts. You have the ability to test the new Margrave options approach to a DLOM as a new method, identify the new platform for BizComps, recognize the increasing numbers of individuals who have professional designations with NACVA. BV firms are thriving, and some implications about that, and then beware of the black box on compensation apps. So with that in mind, new rule crackdown already impacting witnesses. So this doesn't take effect in theory until December 1st of 2023. But publications going back already a month and a half ago are saying people are already starting to apply this in court, and there's actually court publications that are saying we're using this. We didn't wait until December 1 of 2023. Now, many of you knew I was at the IRS for 28 years. My last 11 years, I headed up business valuation. And in that arena, we also addressed Code Section 6695A, which is penalty on appraisers. This new Rule 702 is saying to the judges, you need to be more assertive. And instead of saying, well, we'll let the testimony in and we'll see, we may ask the jury, or I as a decider of fact may say, I'm not going to accept this witness. The courts are being told now, you can be more assertive in this arena. That's kind of it in a nutshell. And it applies specifically to exclude experts. So looking for people who, you do this for a living, you've done many of these, you're experienced in this area. So they're looking for that type of evidence, or if you're new, why you would be accepted as a new person coming on board. The article indicates, as I said, it's being applied now in different jurisdictions, and an appellate court overruled an admissibility of an expert citing this Rule 702. So it's not taking effect until December 1, but an appellate court already has said, we've applied it here and we're excluding somebody. And the court is to be the gatekeeper to weigh the admissibility, is the term. And then there's a study from PwC that says, of all the different experts that appear before the court, appraisers have the highest exclusion rate at 38%. So there's already a perception that there are people doing this work that should be removed. And I can tell you again, working for the IRS, there were about 200 appraisers a year that you would be glad that the IRS said they're no longer working there, working in this arena because of the quality of very poor work. With you with a credential and having NACFA training, you are ready to go, and you meet your standards, you'll be fine. New app for the Margrade options. Now, the IRS has a job aid. You're familiar with that. The job aid, you can download all the IRS job aids at. Simply put in valuation of assets, IRS, and you can download the 4 job aids, the 3 job aids. One is an appendix and a job aid. You can download those from the IRS. And in that job aid, discounts for lack of marketability, the job aid actually indicates follow Dr. Ashok Abbott because he is continually working in this area and he comes up with new methods. And so I'm bringing that to attention out of the job aid. But then here we are. Here's Dr. Ashok Abbott. He's from West Virginia University. He's developed a new calculator based on the Margrave option. And he's allowing folks to say, you can download this, you can use it. And I'm looking for feedback from you of what you think about this. So it's kind of neat that you can test this and use it as a beta test. He's open to suggestions, he's open to improvements. What are other things you might want to see? Then it will likely be finalized and then be another method available to you in terms of determining the fair market value of a discount for lack of marketability. Discounts, it's being upgraded with a new platform. So with this new platform, they're looking to provide additional transactions on small private companies and additional search capabilities compared to what they have had historically. So you'll be able to customize what you'd like to do for your firm and how you might want to use this, and then how you may want to export the results afterwards. If you use Deal Stats, it's the same platform as Deal Stats and others, so it'll look very familiar instead of having its own form, which was different. And you can now save your searches. It provides you with alerts as to what new material is being added, and there are more things beyond that as well. To assist you with this, back in the references for today's session, I have a video that's an intro to this, so you can check that out and see what it is and see if this is something you might want to have. Now, this is something I'm proud of as a NACFA member. I'm a CVA and an ASA. And as you look at the different BV professionals, NACVA has about over 6,500 members. The other two are estimates because we don't have their actual numbers, but ASA is about 1,500. The ASCPA is anywhere between 3,000 and 4,000. And that's simply a guess based on the number of members there. But look at this. In the most recent session of our conference, 151 members earned credentials. Of those, 143 are CVAs and 8 are MAFFs. What this says is our organization continues to grow. The ASA is continuing to shrink. I don't know what the status is with AICPA, but it's nice to see that the organization that we belong to, folks want to belong because of all the training and all the different benefits that NACFA offers to its members. Now, this one you're probably very familiar with. BV firms are thriving. They're doing very well. Per the BVR's benchmarking insights. And Ron Burkhart, he's from Burkhart Valuation Advisors, he helped design the survey, and he helps out people who want to improve their marketing and their presence as a business valuer. So here are some of the stats inside here. 2/3 of the partners and owners saw compensation increase last year. 84% of the firms increased billing rates. I think that's going to continue with inflation and just with demand and with supply. There aren't enough BV people to do all the work for requests that are out there for business valuation. And that just says, well, it looks like you're going to have to charge more because you can only do so much. And the average and median profit margin for these 200 firms that were respondents was 50%. How many businesses can you be in where you've got a profit margin of 50%? Just shows you how well we're doing. Quality control is the top concern. That may be because we're presenting so much in the way of reports and so quickly. We're bringing on board new people who aren't exactly the same level that we may have brought in historically. But as you look at the analysts coming on board, they're doing the best they can, but you want to delegate appropriately and you want to review properly to ensure what's going out is going to meet your quality standards. As you know, one bad report can very negatively impact you going forward. So you want to ensure you have good quality with what you're doing. And that's why one of the top concerns here with these firms that are doing very well economically is, are we going to maintain our same quality? And then it's suggested, rather than being generalists, that you become a niche person. Like, for example, I'm a person that's a mediator and a negotiator in the area of business valuation. So I have a niche of negotiating and mediating in this arena and with the IRS and others. That's a very relatively narrow niche. I started off as a business valuer, and look where I am today with my niche. But I'm suggesting that this article is suggesting that the best opportunities is if you find a niche and you really like working in that area and you want to develop that area, that's probably the best way for you to develop yourself going forward. So 60% of the respondents have business valuation as a primary income. About 50% of those are having 50 engagements or more, and about a third had from 1 to 20 engagements. So, a fair amount of small firms and a fair amount of the larger firms are associated with this analysis. The next one, watch out for black box on compensation. I attended the ASA International Conference. I attended the AICPA conference in Las Vegas here a couple of weeks ago. I'll be at the NACVA conference here in the middle of December. But I attended a session on compensation at the AICPA. And the folks who were at that session gave us some further insights. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. But Neil Beaton, here from Alvarez and Marshall, he was at the Virginia Society of CPAs, and he said, really urging caution relative to the black box and what's involved with compensation and algorithms. The IRS has a job aid on reasonable compensation. I helped champion that job aid, and there's an appendix with that too. And in that job aid, the service really says, be cautious of this too, because you could be challenged on it. And the service recommends having several sources. The IRS also says, with respect to ERI, that you shouldn't use this by itself. ERI has great data at kind of mid-range things, but not so much data at areas that might be outliers. So it was suggested by Neil Beaton, ERI was an example of where you don't know what the underlying data is. You kind of have a black box there. And it's recommended that you have more than one source by the IRS. Some of the commentary I heard at the AICPA session with a couple of people was, you may want to have 3 sources to look at this. And they presented an example with 2 sources that had very wide differences associated with them, and then talked about those. So you want to consider other elements associated with the business comp and know where they come from. So for example, if you're using some source, what elements are included with that data? The IRS looks at compensation as 7 different components. They start off with a basic salary, and they say there are fringe benefits. Then there's a short-term incentive. There's a long-term incentive. There's a bonus. There is a chance to buy stock into this entity, and there's severance pay. And depending on where you're at with your given entity, which of those may or may not be applicable, and which ones of those are included in whatever data source you're using. So if one source, for example, is including fringe benefits and bonuses, the other one is not including fringe benefits and bonuses, they can have widely different analysis coming forward. So you want to make sure you know that too. And again, note the IRS job aid on reasonable compensation. Again, you can go to, with Google, you can simply search on valuation of assets and put in IRS and it'll bring it up. At my website, mikegreg.com, there are links to these things I just talked about here too. And also at my website, I have 4 complimentary ebooks. And one of those deals with reasonable compensation. I've got this large book called Business Valuations in the IRS, 5 books in one. And many firms have bought those books and just have them as a reference. It's a big book, 850 pages. It has 38 examples, and it goes into a lot of detail. I put together these ebooks, which contains about a third of the information by topic, whether it be an S Corp or reasonable compensation or writing a report for the IRS or discount for lack of marketability, and put those in there to help you. My whole goal is trying to help our whole profession be better. That's why they're complementary in nature. But there's one in there specifically on reasonable compensation. And I'm suggesting if you want to know more about that topic in the IRS, that's a great source for you that I've put together as a complimentary ebook to help you with that topic. So in terms of different sources for today, the courts are applying Rule 702 currently. This is the article that I'm giving back as a reference on it that says, yes, it's not coming out until December 1st, which isn't that far away, but it's already made its way to be affirmed at the appellate level in a court case. And then on appraisers having the highest exclusion rate, understand that there's already a premise that we may be biased, we may not have done the best work, so the courts are looking at us with a jaundiced eye. And what you want to make sure you're doing is that you have a qualified appraisal, and you're a qualified appraiser, and you've met your standards. So if you've met your standards with NACVA, you're coming in fine, but you want to make sure you've done that because the courts are taking a harder look at this going forward. And then this is the model from Ashok Abbott on the new Margrave options model. So you may want to download that, and if nothing else, just apply it and see what that shows up with respect to the different models that you're using now. And if you want to give any feedback back to Ashok Abbott, go ahead and do that. And then here's the BizComp upgrade platform, and there's an intro video with it. So you can check it out to say, what do they have in the video? And is that something I might want to look into in greater detail? This is a complimentary ebook on reasonable compensation that I mentioned. That's the link to it. Again, my name is Michael Gregory, so it's real simple. It's just MikeGreg.com. I just shortened those two. And you can find that in association where the books are. And then the IRS job aids, including reasonable compensation. I said this verbally to you, but you can go to that site right there, or you can put in valuation of assets in IRS and it'll bring it up. And all these are being done with the intention of helping you to have some resources you can look at too. And then these are the different sources that I look at each month. So I look at BV Wire, I look at BV Update, the Value Examiner, NACVA training summaries, valuation products and services, and I'll have more on that one next month with some information from Jim Hitchner. IRS sources, and I have a number of sources at the IRS. In fact, I'll be talking to one of them this evening after work, and then other sources as well. And again, this is my contact information. So if you want to contact me, and I typically get 2 or 3 folks who contact me in a given week. And last month I made a presentation to the Tennessee Society of CPAs, and there were about 60 people, I think, in the room, and I think we had about 100 on the line. And 3 of the people in the room were people who had contacted me at one point just to ask something. And I'm just letting you know, I'm happy to do it. It's free, it's complimentary, and if I can help you, I'd be happy to do so. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to bring it back to either Mel or Alina, and you can take it from here.
Thank you, Michael. Great information as always. Stuff for us to dig into and make a difference. And I totally agree with you with the growth of the organization and the membership. So thank you for being there. The first polling question is up for all of you. Make sure that you're answering if you want to get CPE credits as we set up for our next session, which really is about the body of knowledge and some key elements there. And Ed Mofrad is going to be interviewing Alan Gorlick. I'm going to let Ed introduce his guest. He's got lots of initials and lots of qualifications. They're going to be talking about valuations under interest rate volatility, which is where we're at right now. So Ed, welcome aboard. So good to have you, my friend.
Thank you for that grand introduction, Mel, as you always do. This is Ed Mofrad. As he said, I'm a CPA, CVA, and it is my pleasure, really my honor, to be interviewing Mr. Alan Gorlick today on the topic of valuation under interest rate volatility. Let me give you a little bit of background about Alan. Before I do that, though, he's going to have a grand presentation later today. This is just a prelude to that. So I'm just whetting everybody's appetite. Alan is CEO of, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Gorlick Financial Strategies. Prior to financial services, he has significant executive level and consulting experience. in international business and corporate finance. He's also a popular speaker, seminar leader, and writer on finance, economic, accounting, risk management, and option theory. For 29 years, he's been a part-time college professor teaching MBA courses and undergraduate finance as well in economics, strategy, and marketing. His academic research includes risk management, strategic options, and value creation. With that, Alan, I'm so glad and honored to be interviewing you today, sir. Let me start by asking you the first question. Why are we focusing on interest rates?
Well, we can't avoid them. You can't turn the news on without somebody talking about the 10-year Treasury or inflation. Everybody talks about inflation without understanding it. And in our business, if you do any kind of analysis of what the big factors are when you do valuation of free cash flow in the future, the interest rate or the hurdle rate is the most important variable.
Well, okay, but can't we just use current rates, recent averages, or extrapolations, if you will? Why do we actually need to model rates?
Well, if there were long-term trends, we could do that. And for a long time, maybe like the last 30 years, long-term trends were what we had. We actually could say, the last 10 years, here's what rates are doing. We could figure out the average or just extrapolate from what we have. But they are so volatile that, if you've got a Bloomberg, you could be watching the 10-year Treasury minute by minute changing, and not by a little bit, but, 4.8 to 5.1 in a few days. And so I just can't think of what I would extrapolate from or what average I would use. And it's fascinating. I teach a course called Applied Security Analysis, where we actually teach these kids to be stock analysts. And so there's case studies, or the course is constant case studies where they pretend to be stock analysts and they evaluate a company. And I always ask them what they use for the risk-free rate. Not because there's one right answer, but because I'm fascinated with the different ways that different students try to tackle that problem.
Well said. Our learned listeners have heard of the abundant reserve regimen. As you are, the expert at it. Under this regimen, the Fed seems to just conjure up the Fed funds rate. What chance do we have to model this phenomenon?
Well, we can't model what the Fed's going to do because nobody knows, not even them. If you look at what they call the dot plots, there's a dot plot for what the Fed experts inside believe is going to happen to the Fed funds rate. There's a dot plot for what the market, you can infer from the market what it thinks is going to happen to the Fed funds rate. And then there's a dot plot for what actually happens to the Fed funds rate. And those three lines never converge. So you really you wouldn't even know which line to look at. But if you want to talk about the abundant reserves, it's an interesting subject. And I think people are going to get their doctorates figuring out if this helped or hurt. Because if you look back, say 20 years, the Fed would set the Fed funds rate. That's the rate that banks charge each other when they borrow overnight, right? So they take the annual rate and divide it by 360, and that's what they charge for one night. And because banks were constantly borrowing from each other, the Fed could control the Fed funds rate by just maneuvering the reserves. Because if the bank had enough reserves, they didn't have to borrow. They had too few reserves, they had to borrow. And the Fed could jump in and out of the market and manipulate the Fed funds rate without even telling us what they were going to do. It just happened. And then the next step was the Fed said, all right, we'll announce it. We'll still do what we were doing, but we'll announce it. And the announcement created a new phenomenon, which was kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because if the Fed said the funds rate was going to be 50 basis points, the banks just started charging each other 50 basis points because they knew the Fed is so good at this that they'll make it happen. So now if you sorry, yeah?
Go. Please finish your thought.
So if you fast forward to today, with abundant reserves, the banks don't have to borrow from each other. There's almost none of that going on unless there's a crisis. And when there's a crisis, they want to borrow from the Fed, not from each other. So that's the what's the Fed calls the discount rate, which is sometimes the same as the Fed funds rate, sometimes slightly different. But it's what the Fed would charge a bank to borrow from them. It's almost never used. In fact, Silicon Valley Bank, which could have used it, didn't. So that's almost never used. But if you look back to with the abundant reserves now, so the Fed comes out and they say, all right, interest rates are going to be, and I don't know what the Fed funds rate is today, let's say 4.5%, right?
Mhm.
They just made that number up. There's no active market going on with banks buying it or borrowing from each other because they don't have to. The reserves are huge. So the only influence the Fed really has, other than saying this is the number, is paying interest on these reserves. So they pay a lot of interest on these reserves. In fact, that's the main reason the Fed is actually not showing a profit this year. They're one of the worst businesses in the country because they're paying out all this interest on these reserves. Well, they're paying interest on the reserves. So that has some influence on what the Fed funds rate is going to be. But again, they made it up. If they pay less interest on reserves, the Fed funds rate would be less, but they'd still be the reserves because they can force it. So any chance we had to sort of glean a way to model this by looking at what's going on in the market is gone because the Fed is essentially just, like I say, just making it up. Maybe that's not fair, but I'm not sure what else to call it.
Is there any hope of predicting what the Fed is going to do, or are we just wasting our time because there's no rhyme and reason? What do you think, Alan?
Well, I guess we have to do it, right? No battle plan survives contact with the enemy, but you still need to have one, right? One of the slides I have on my presentation shows serious prediction the Fed funds rate is going to come down over the next couple of years. And so it probably will. So I think we have to do some of it. And remember back in the day, we tried to guess what was going on by the thickness of Greenspan's briefcase. We don't have that anymore. But we still have to at least try to figure out what they're going to respond to. And I think part of it is the Fed is supposedly apolitical. They're not responsive to what politicians want. They're independent, however you want to define that, but not really. They're human beings. They get beat up, and there's just so much they can stand. And they sit twice a year that Jay Powell has to sit in front of Congress, and he almost never gets praised. He just, whatever he does, he gets beaten up. And so they can't help it. They try to be independent, but they can't help it. And as long as those influences are there, it makes it extra important for us to try to guess what they're going to do.
Yes, I feel all we're doing is guessing because I know I've been wrong, but you're giving me hope now. I'm going to continue attempting. Are there behavioral issues, or can we just stick to the math?
Well, the behavioral issues, I think, come out of what I just said, the fact that there's human influences in every direction. If you look at some of the others, again, if you think back to Greenspan's years, I think he ran it for 19 years. So he really was Greenspan's Fed for a long time. And one of the things he did, I don't know if it was official, I never sat in a meeting, but he ruled with an iron fist. I mean, if Greenspan said something, you didn't have 6 governors giving speeches saying something different. And as soon as Bernanke took over, that's what happened. Everybody had an opinion, and these are smart people. Their opinions are worth listening to. But if Minneapolis disagrees with St. Louis and St. Louis disagrees with New York, they all have a soapbox. They all get up and talk. And so you already have behavioral issues that you can't ignore. But the other, which I think probably gets a little closer to the math, is if you look at how much something is going to change, right? So you say, whether you're talking about the Fed funds rate or the 10-year Treasury or prime rate or any of these interest rates that we like to look at, if the number's 4, current number is 4, and then what are the chances it's going to go to 4.5? Well, you can figure out what that's going to be. But if the number is 10, the chance of going to 10.5 is much greater than from 4 to 4.5. Even though it's 0.5% or 50 basis points each time, the starting point does matter. It matters from an emotional point of view, and it matters from a mathematical point of view. So one of the things I'm going to talk about in my presentation is when you model this, even if you believe it's as straightforward as a normal distribution, you need to model it as log normal, because you need to look at the percentage change rather than the raw data change. And then you'll realize that 10 to 10.5 is easier than 4 to 4.5.
Yes. Okay, if there was one thing that you would like your participants to take away from your presentation, what would it be?
Well, I'd like them, and this is sort of the whole theme of the presentation, but I'd like them to be able to use spreadsheets to deal with this problem. We're not going to turn them into math majors. We don't want them to suffer through trying to solve differential equations, and we don't want them to have answers that they can't do anything with. It was in the previous presentation, there was a lot of talk about courts saying that expert witnesses aren't really experts, and that they aren't really providing information that anyone can use. Well, right along with not being an expert is being too much of an expert, where you start to talk in jargon or you present math that nobody can understand. And maybe it helps raise your fees, but it probably doesn't sell very well in a court, because people can't cross-examine you. They just have no idea what you're talking about. And if you're in front of a jury, they're not likely to do very well with it either. But if you can do it in a spreadsheet, you can put it up on the screen and say, here's my spreadsheet. And here are the 3 assumptions that I built in based on what we know today about interest rates. I think you have a really good chance of getting your point across. And so that's what I'd like people to leave with today, that they have a process where they can look at interest rates, they can look at the history, and they can say, all right, here's how I build a spreadsheet that I can understand and that I can explain. I think Einstein said, if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't understand it. That's probably a little harsh, but certainly if you can't explain it to an intelligent adult, you probably don't understand it.
Well, there are, as you know, infinite number of niches within the world of valuation itself, valuation, forensics, expert witness. Which one of these niches more narrowly do you think will benefit from attending your presentation and will be able to walk away with the most?
I'm not sure, because I'm not really certain about how these different titles overlap. But certainly, if you're actually doing valuation, and you're doing it by looking at the present value of something in the future, and we look at free cash flow, and none of these things are as well defined as we think they are. Even something as textbook written as free cash flow. So there'll probably be more than one way to look at it. But if you're taking the present value of anything in the future, then you're going to use a hurdle rate. And if you're going to use a hurdle rate, you can try to simplify it and just use today's number, or you can model it. And if you're going to model it, then I hope you'll learn something from the presentation, and it will help you come up with a model that you can understand and that you can defend.
Well said. You are who you are because you know how to explain it really well. You should have been a teacher, Alan. You are a teacher.
I don't have all those credentials that were on that slide, though, that first slide. I don't know where.
We like to boost you up. Very well. I can't wait to your extended presentation. Thank you for being here. Thank you. We're honored to have you. And with that, do you have anything more to add, or that's it?
No, I mean, I hope people will attend this afternoon. And I've done this presentation before, and we get very few questions. And I'm always wondering if that's because I did such a perfect job, or I did such a over their head job that they don't even know where to begin to ask a question. But I encourage people, ask questions. I don't get insulted. You can challenge what I said. You can ask for more information. You can contact me later. but I like people to be engaged.
Well, knowing you like I do, I know you don't get insulted. I feel very comfortable, conversing with you, interviewing you, talking with you, even on the phone. Thank you, Alan. And again, I look very much forward to your presentation and watching all your slides, which will be available later. People can look them up. Thank you. And thank you for keeping this one simple.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mel, do you want to take it over?
Really quick, thank you, Ed and Alan. Really quick for the attendees, if you are interested in joining the webinar that is happening immediately after the ABW webcast today, in your materials, you can click on the link that's on the slide that's appearing right now. You can also visit nacb.com/ABW in depth, and that will provide you with more information as well as a link to register for the webinar. Right, and your next poll question is up right now, so please remember to respond to those for CPE. And I'm going to turn the time over to Mel and Alina now, who will get us ready for our next segment.
Thank you, Chanda. And just make sure you respond to those polling questions. I know there are people asking about that, so I think we already had two. And now we are going to our next session, and it's going to be we're going to be talking to Ashley Mercury and Dylan Gans. And our section is called Multi-Generational Collaboration in the Workplace. So welcome, Dylan. Welcome, Ashley. Ashley is a CPA, ABB, and CBA. She is a senior manager in the Evaluation, Forensic, and Litigation Services Group at Marcum LLP. She began her professional career as a CPA and then changed, to other areas such as business valuation, litigation support, and financial reporting. And she expanded her professional knowledge. As I mentioned at the beginning, she's a CPA, but also a CBA and an ABB, I'm sorry. And she's one of our 30 under 30 class. And then we also have Dylan with us. Dylan Gans is he co-founded Baton Market to bring previously out of reach business valuation data and expert guidance to every U.S. small business owner. And so he's building this new company, very interesting. He's going to be talking more about that. And he also sits on the board of an Alzheimer non-for-profit organization. So welcome, Dylan. Welcome, Ashley, to our show. How are you today?
Good. Thank you so much for having us.
I'm great.
Perfect.
I feel like I forgot the letters after my name at home for this call.
It's okay. Ashley has lots of them already, so maybe that's
maybe I can borrow some from Ashley.
Right over to you.
True. So, Ashley, talk to us about you, how you got into the evaluation profession, what you specifically do in your company. Talk to us about you so we can know you.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm at Marcum LLP. I'm in our Valuation, Forensic, and Litigation Support Group. I sit in our Cleveland, Ohio office, but Marcum has offices across the U.S. as well as some select international locations as well. I was actually part of a smaller firm that merged into Marcum at the end of 2020. So really right before the pandemic we merged in. But with that time included, I've been with the firm for about 8 years now. But as you kind of said in the beginning, I started with accounting. So I got my accounting degree and my CPA and was in the assurance practice for about 4.5 years. I didn't really know about the valuation world going into accounting. And my firm did presentations just on the different service lines within the firms that we provide to clients. So I actually heard of valuation through that. And once the partners presented on the valuation group, I was pretty interested and started reading more into valuation services and just had continued conversations with those partners. And after a few years in the audit practice, they had, projects here and there that I could assist on. So I started slowly transitioning out of assurance work and then into the valuation work. I became full-time again about 4 years ago now. So I really owe the pivot in my career into valuation just to that internship presentation and being more aware of service lines that, CPAs and finance backgrounds can get into. And then fast forward to today, I focus mainly on valuation services. So I do, gift and estate work, divorce, shareholder disputes, buyouts, strategic planning. And then on the litigation support side, I've helped with damages, lost profits cases, and then like other financial analysis.
That is great. It's very interesting that you mentioned about knowing the topic of business valuation through presentations at the university, because when I studied a long time ago, it was you were an auditor or a tax person, or you did bookkeeping, but nothing else. Nothing else was discussed. And actually I have tomorrow a presentation for one of our universities here in Puerto Rico. One of the accounting association reached out to explain to the students about business valuation. So it's very interesting how it's been changing with, the years, about making sure that the newer generations, they know about these different topics. And it's not that we are, boring accountants and we only do business, accounting or taxes. So very interesting. And Dylan, what about you?
Awesome. It's really cool to be here. And I joke about not having 3 letters at the end of my name, or any letters at the end of my name. So hopefully I can kind of come at this from maybe a bit of an outsider perspective and just talk about kind of the things that we're working on and what I've seen in my roles in the space. But yeah, before starting Baton, I was a VP and on the founding team of a company called Good Uncle. We were a food delivery startup backed by some major venture capitalists, the same people who backed Uber, GroupMe, Birchbox. And my founders were really amazing there, and they had sold their previous business. My co-founders there sold their previous business for 9 figures after 2 years. So they really knew what they were doing when it came to acquisitions and how to put these companies together and sell these businesses. So I joined them, and we ended up selling that business to Aramark in 2019. For those of you who don't know, Aramark is a big Fortune 500 food service conglomerate, and I was really involved in that acquisition because I was effectively on the exec team and running a lot of the kind of data analysis for that business. And my realization there with these veterans in the selling a company space, I was like, acquisitions are really hard. And I got to stay on at Aramark for 2 years after as a VP, which was awesome. And we grew that business a bunch while I was there, and they were really great corporate parents. And then I kind of got excited about the small business acquisition space, and I'll tie this back into valuations in a sec. But I had a friend, going through the acquisition. Then I had a friend who was doing tech sales in Boston and ended up buying a commercial cleaning company in Nashville, which I thought that was like the really weird career path. But the more I learned about it, the deals in the lower middle market are really enticing in terms of economics. There are different financing options that make those deals available. I mean, we just had to talk about the interest rate, so it's a live situation, but there are accessible ways to go about these deals. And then I thought, and this is kind of the foray into valuations, I thought the current options for business owners to sell their business and people to buy businesses were really outdated and really bad. So I kind of just started diving into everything in the small business acquisition space. And I met some amazing co-founders who had built products for big companies like Kickstarter and The Wing. And my other co-founder was leading strategy at Zillow. So they had seen, kind of parallels to this. And I think Zillow is a good parallel. Who said, the biggest problem that we were finding when talking to small business owners is that none of them knew how much their business was worth. And we set out on a mission to how do we kind of give that knowledge to the business owner. And it's been interesting because, we're not doing certified valuations at Baton right now. We do effectively a broker opinion of value. I brought in CFAs that I'd worked with before in New York. So kind of these high finance folks to come in and create models for the lower middle market for small businesses. And we paid a lot of money up front for as many sold business comps as we could, and kind of designing a report that business owners can understand. So what Baton is today is we're working to be the Zillow for buying and selling small businesses. We want to be a marketplace for these businesses to transact, but really supporting those owners in understanding, how much their company's worth, which is, I think, why I'm on this panel.
Yeah. So what do you think will attract young professionals to the evaluation profession? Just as you have a kind of different path, but what do you think will attract young professionals to this profession specifically?
Should I go first for this one?
Yeah, you can go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Cool. It's interesting because Baton is outsiders to the evaluations world in a way, but I've been able to hire really phenomenal folks, and CFAs and business brokers, and I think what's attracted people to Baton, at least, and that's what I can kind of speak from, and the things that I've seen work well is, one, we're really mission driven. So it's like we are going to support every small business owner in understanding how much their business is worth. And we are going to help all of these owners transact and get compensated for their lives work. And we're going to empower a new generation of entrepreneurs. And I think for younger folks, that's really important, along with, feeling like you're really developing. And I think that seems like a thing that the space is doing really well. Is that you can get these certifications and you can grow, and kind of work can be a place for you to self-actualize, which is something that I always say. But the thing that I think is really important is showing people how you're a part of this bigger thing. And then the last thing that I'll say is transparency is really important, and feeling like you're shaking up knowledge for an industry, and being transparent in that way, but then also being transparent with your employees. We're honest. We tell our employees pretty much everything that's going on in the business. And I think they're really grateful for that. And that's definitely something we benefited from. I'm curious to hear what
Ashley. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I want to go back to what we were talking about earlier, Alina, but I think attracting young professionals into the valuation profession first starts with just better exposure to valuation work. So in my experience, a lot of college students, even, they're just not familiar with valuation, or, haven't heard of it until we kind of step in and talk about it from the accounting side. So I think the first step would just be better visibility in colleges. So having professional organizations, company presentations, just to introduce valuation service lines, like similar to Dylan's service lines too. I think that would be helpful just to gain a better knowledge. And then, at my firm, normally when we go out for accounting career fairs or, finance career fairs, all that good stuff, we like to at least try to say, we have a valuation service line. We do like different advisory services, just to kind of plant the seed a little bit. It might not be something that they're going to do right now. They might be pursuing accounting or finance, but just keeping that in the back of their minds to say, there's other lines out there that you can go into. But I think, planting that seed, you can kind of get a little bit more traction with the new generation. And then I guess for things to highlight to get them maybe more interested, I always say, we have a mix of work. We have exposure to different companies in different industries. There's various types of projects, types of like different service lines that you can work in. So, just being able to lay out all the different options and just give that exposure.
And I think in some way it can give you purpose, right? It's not the same going to a client and audit, do an audit and just leaving, and there is no relationship. But when you start working for a client and you do certain consulting engagements, and as part of that, you do business valuations and you see how they are able to grow the business, to help them recognize their drivers. Because with a small business, as Dylan mentioned, sometimes it's just, I don't know, someone told me that 5x EBITDA is going to work for me. But then when you can talk to them and teach them, I think that's important for this new generation, to have a purpose and to see that what they are doing is actually adding value to that client. It's not anymore as it's just, money transaction. It's kind of different, I think. What do you think, Dylan?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to I want to echo this because I see there are 170 people here, and how often do I get to talk to a bunch of industry leaders and future industry leaders? And to me, the thing for us to lean into as an industry is that on our best day, if we're doing really good work, we are empowering people with information that they did not have access to. And that is a noble mission. And that I believe, and at least I've seen it for me, will attract great young talent.
Mm-hmm. That's true. So I think that's an interesting point to go to our next question, and is how can employers retain talent and keep young professionals invested and engaged? What do you think about that? Oh, Ashley?
So I think retaining employees in any profession is difficult, but the best way to keep talented young professionals is to create an open and collaborative workspace, in my opinion. So allow them to share their ideas and venture away from that, like, this is how things have always been done mentality, like actually let them think outside the box and do things differently than we've done before. And I'm sure most people would agree, but my workplace, at least, it looks a lot different now than when we first started our careers. So just continuing to adapt to different work styles, offering flexible working arrangements, I think that'll appeal to the younger generation. And then for keeping employees invested and engaged, I think it's important to provide growth and development opportunities. So like get those professionals involved in real world experiences, take them to client meetings, get them in on like important calls that are happening with your clients, let them sit on a testimony or a deposition. I just think the more that you could show them in terms of real interaction and what's going on in the workplace, it's going to be better than them just sitting at their desk doing analysis or like helping prepare questions or something like that, but just getting them more engaged.
Yeah, that's true. Dylan?
It makes me want to work for Ashley. I think, yeah, I don't have that much to add. I think one thing is that just to keep in mind, a trend is that a lot of people now, young people, work at places for 2 to 4 years and then move on. And I think the reason for that is exactly what Ashley said. It's thinking about professional development. And one thing that we do at Baton, at least, is I ask people, almost every week, but formally every review cycle, which happens 2 times a year, like, tell me about your career goals and where do you want to go? And then I'm making sure that we're designing programs and your role is designed around, where you want to take your career. And I think the younger are, I feel like this at least, but I work for the company as much as the company works for me. And the company has an obligation to provide me a service, which is money for output, but also career development. So that's something I think of a lot. The other thing, and I think Ashley touched on this with kind of flexible work arrangements, is that the younger generation is probably more used to being results oriented rather than action oriented. And the idea, for example, that everybody has to be in an office 40 to 80 hours a week is quite archaic to me, because that was designed before we had Zoom and computers. And if we were going to take that from scratch and say, okay, what does a good workplace look like today? I don't think we'd end up in the same place with you have to be in the office every day. And I don't mean to, I love being in person with the team, and we have an office in New York and we spend a lot of in-person time together. So I think it's really valuable. But I think it's just like a general, and I use remote work as a highlight because it's very understandable, but I think it's a general switch to being work driven and like what are the things that somebody's putting in to being results driven. And that also helps you retain top talent.
And I think it's very interesting that both of you mentioned the flexibility about working from not an actual office. Because I just probably 2-3 days ago, I saw, it was posted a couple of months ago. It was this TikToker and she was crying about having to work. I don't know if you saw that, about having to work at the office. And that was created when she went even back when women were at home, but now we have to work at an office and go back and we have to clean she was crying a lot. And one of the things that I posted is that my clients, I think they ask for this every day. And then we have Gen Z that started working during the pandemic. They started working, most of them. So they represent 24% of the working population right now. So even old millennials and Xers, we are living this. So if we want to retain good employees, we need to start doing, having some flexibility. And I think, Dylan, what you mentioned in terms of results driven is very important. But I think that is a mindset that we that have been working for a long time now, we need to have that in mind. Because if we want to retain good employees and collaborators, we have to be flexible. I don't care if you work from the beach, especially here in Puerto Rico. As long as I have my results, I don't care. But I think that is a mentality that it's for us to change. And also for you to be patient with us. I have been working for 22, 23 years in an office. So it's different. And I think it's from both sides to just make sure that there is some communication, maybe not full-time remote, but maybe some sort of flexibility because it's needed at this point. So thank you. That was very interesting. So go ahead.
I just want to add to that really quickly for any of the younger generation people that are listening to this. And Ashley is in an office right now. I'm in an office right now. I run my own company, so it's a little bit different. But for the younger generation, you still have to play the game. And if you're working for somebody, there's a partner who thinks that people should be in 4 days a week, 5 days a week, then you're going to go a lot farther in your career of building that and like going into the office, playing the game, showing up, being in person, because all of that is really important. So yeah, I just don't want to say that and then the result be people would boycott and strike working for really smart people that have been doing this for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. That's all.
Yeah.
And I
It's
think
funny
there's a
that
point-
Go ahead, Ashley. Go ahead.
There's just a point in the chat too, saying that it's hard for beginners, accountants, valuation professionals to learn remotely, so that they need, that training and all that before they can progress to being remote. And I think I agree with that. It's definitely harder when you're starting in your career to, be able to just go remote, not really have any FaceTime with anybody and just kind of do your thing. So there does take, there's a commitment at the forefront to make sure that you're learning as much as possible, meeting as many people in your company as possible, and getting that face-to-face time before you go out. But I mean, I think it's important at any point to keep, involved in your office, make sure people know you, make sure, even people outside the organization know you. So you can't get out of going to things altogether, but I think the flexibility is huge.
That is great. So what skills before the next questions, there is a poll question right now. So make sure you'll respond to that because it's in the middle of the session. So just making sure that people don't forget to respond. So Dylan and Ashley, what skills and competencies are essential for young professionals in the evaluation profession that you think you should develop in order to succeed? Ashley.
So the first essential skill that comes to mind is communication for young professionals. It's not only important when you're beginning your career and you're just keeping up with the team and making sure that, your clients are updated, your teams are informed, but it's also important to be able to explain valuation concepts and put complex topics into easily understandable terms. I think someone that talked earlier, it might have been Mike Gregory, talked about this, but you have to be able to explain stuff to people and easily articulate it so that they can understand, or else you can be the smartest person in the room, but if you can't explain it and put it into easily understandable terms, they're not going to understand and they're not going to be able to, take that knowledge away from you. So I think communication is just huge in our field because there are some complex topics, and being able to put them into layman's terms for a client or for a judge or anybody that needs to understand, I think is a pretty essential skill that you should have.
So storytelling is important. Dylan.
I'm actually not a valuations professional, really. So I don't know if I'd be the right person to answer this. But I think, yeah, kind of maybe going back to what I just said, I would just harp on that, it's important to play the game. And Gen Z, I don't know, Ashley, are you a millennial or Gen Z?
Millennial.
You're a millennial. I'm 27, so I'm on the cusp of millennial and Gen Z. The younger Gen Z generation is a very different beast, if you will, than maybe millennials are. But I think Gen Z gets a reputation for being entitled, and I think it's important to remember that you're coming to work for people like we talked about, Alina, with lots of experience, who are brilliant and have been doing things the way they have been for a reason and are successful for a reason. And I would just say, I would encourage everybody to keep an open mind, and go in and with the beginner's mindset, with the learner's mindset.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, Dylan, because I understand how you feel, because I'm the one in the line, but not Gen Z and millennial, obviously, but I'm Gen X millennial. And whenever they discuss things about, problems with the millennials, I will say, no, I'm a Zennial. I'm more like a Gen X. So, because we don't want to take the bad things of those next generation. But it's very interesting, that division when the generations change. So I guess Ashley is a younger millennial, I guess, almost Z, because you're very young. But yeah, definitely. I think every generation is going to have good things and bad things. And we complain about Gen Z, but whatever you do that is not correct is our fault. So we need to deal with you guys because we are your parents, right? It is interesting because in the chat, there is someone that said, I had a prospective client ask me once, I know you understand it, but can you sell it? And she said, I did not get the job. So storytelling is very important, Thank you, Marianne. That was good. So what mentorship and professional development opportunities are available to support the growth and progression of young professional? Or even if there is a type of mentorship that you will prefer as a different generation, maybe it's not about seating you and having you in an office with me while I talk to a client. Maybe it's a different way to do it, going to a cafe or whatever way you think is better to make sure that your generation, we can mentor you and you can succeed in this profession. Ashley, you
want to go first?
Or Dylan?
I feel like I've been going first. I'll give him the...
Yeah.
So go ahead, Dylan.
I'll go first. I'm sure Ashley probably has some ideas for resources. It seems like this organization and things like this are really good resources for folks who might want to spend more time in the space, because you have people like me and Ashley talk, so it has to be good. But then I think just in terms of how to communicate, one thing again that I just come back to is being results driven and remembering that. To me, I'm like, this is the video game generation. So we like leveling up, and we like a clear start and finish. So I think, and for me, the most helpful mentors that I have kind of work with me to set some goals. And then we talk about how I'm going to achieve those goals. And then we check back in. And then I can bring problems and roadblocks that I hit to those mentors, but really working on what's the outline, what's the path to execute, and then checking back in and developing a friendship too, which is probably important for every generation. I don't think that's something that's new, but something that I've definitely seen that my team values.
And that's true. You said from start to finish, and quick is fast, like a microwave. It has to be, quick. Ashley.
I'm going to echo Dylan's comments on that too. I mean, my main thing with my coaches and mentors is just to set goals for each year and just work towards those throughout the year, have quarterly check-ins to make sure that you're actually progressing on those goals. And if they change, that's fine too, but just making sure that you're working towards something. So I think, having a coaching program in place is essential. If you don't have a coach, I don't think it has to be someone from your company necessarily. I think it could be someone that you look up to and they're, they could teach you something about your professional career and moving forward. So I think you just have to make sure you're reaching out to someone that can give you, that mentorship. I actually have people that I reach out to on the valuation side. And then I've also got a woman coach. Well, that's one of our partners here at Markham that's not in the valuation group. But I just wanted to see, how her journey was different than some of the other partners that I talked to. And, just different insights in how I can achieve and move up in my role. So I just think it's important to kind of have those goals and be able to talk about them and just make sure you're checking in and like actually moving forward on them.
Ashley, I'm curious, have your, let's say, best mentorships, are those things that have lasted 5 years, multiple years, or is it shorter stints, kind of like goal-based, and then move on, maintain the friendship, but maybe not the same mentorship level?
That's a really good question. The longest mentorship I've had actually was with the 2 partners that did the internship presentation in the valuation group that got me interested in valuation from the start. So it was like we built pretty much a friendship, and I just trust them so much with how they want me to grow in my career that it's been my longest ongoing coaching program that I've been doing. And we meet monthly just to make sure that, my goals are still in line with how I want to progress. But then I've had a couple where it's like, I meet with them for different industry challenges. So I wanted to, move up I wanted to do something board related. So making sure that I was giving back to the community. So I talked to a partner that was very board focused and kind of kept that relationship going, but I don't meet with them as frequently as I used to. So I think that's a really good point, Dylan.
That's so cool. Yeah, my experience echoes that. I have there's some people on the Baton board and some investors that we have that have been really long-term mentors for me. We don't meet once a month, but maybe once a quarter or once every 6 months. But a lot of my mentors have been kind of these short, and I just love it. It's like the same thing that Ash said. It's like, hey, I want to get from here to here, and you seem like a good person to get me there. And I think for a lot of those folks, if you're doing a good job as a mentor, your mentee should actually outgrow your advice. Unless, and I think it makes sense. There's some people that are so far ahead of me that when they started working with me, that I'll always go to them. But for those certain things, it's like you pull somebody up and then they're on their way.
So be a word that we don't necessarily like, but it's about accountability. So Ashley mentioned that person asked about results. And I think that's very important to make sure that your mentor can support you define those goals and help you with reaching those goals, but it's about accountability. So I think that's very important in a mentor, especially for, making sure that your goals are not only short-term. You have midterm and long-term, even if they change with from time to time. So that's great. And what are your future outlooks for the evaluation professions? What do you think about?
You want me to start?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, I'll go for it. So obviously a major trend right now is just the expansion of technology and data. Just access to data has grown significantly. It's just going to continue to grow. So I think it's critical for young professionals to understand how to best use that readily available data. And then, it might be an opportunity, but it also might be a challenge. So just making sure you're able to understand it, explain how the data is pulled, how it's reviewed, how you're actually utilizing it. More information available. It would be, I guess I'm going back to quality control and making sure that you're putting the necessary controls in place, but just making sure that even though you have that data, it's being used appropriately, I guess. Just have to have more checks in place, I guess. Is that what I'm saying? But yeah, making sure you're using it to the best of your abilities.
And going back to the last discussion about mentorship, Trish mentioned, and I forgot about that NACVA has a mentor platform. NACVA has a mentor platform. And she said that she has 3 mentees and she loves it. So long-term friends and mentorship. So that's a great idea. And so thanks, Rich, for that. I totally forgot about that. And actually, you're mentioning about technology and the future outlooks. And one of the things that we are bringing this year, we already have some discussion about it, but next year we are going to have some sessions about AI and how that is going to be impacting our profession, business valuation, litigation, and everything related and in between. So yeah, true. Dylan.
I totally agree with all that. I think there's the trend of technology, which is going to should make valuations and should make your firm more efficient, and hopefully machine learning can do that, and the field of artificial intelligence can do that. The other trend that we see at Baton, and we look at all different industries across the board, and real estate's a great example, where before Zillow, there was no place on the internet to go to get a feel for home prices. And then Zillow came in and made a lot of real estate appraisers really angry, but most people still go to Zillow to look at his estimate, and they check their estimate pretty religiously to understand, their home price. And I think over time, I don't know if I think it's going to happen sooner, but who knows? But 5, 10, 15 years from now, a lot of this data is going to be public. So what I would push for the industry is to make sure that it's not about the value and the asset that you'll have as a firm and as a profession won't be the comps in your database and these things that are in a drive somewhere behind a wall, because OpenAI and these other artificial intelligence companies are going to expose all of that. It's going to be exactly what Ashley said, of how do you utilize that data, and what do you do as a professional to work with a business owner to say, okay, this is your valuation now, but how do you grow the business? Or this is your valuation you want to sell. How do we make sure that we sell for the most attractive price or on the best terms? So that's the trend that I see.
It's pretty true. It's true, because AI, it works for a lot of things, but this cannot be substituted. So it doesn't matter the generation and the tech advantage that we have. We need to make sure that there are some things that our experiences are going to give us that AI or any other technology is not going to be able to substitute. And that's where we can add value to our clients. So definitely. So we are just going to the end of our sessions, but I just want to make sure to give you time just to talk to us about any topic, anything you want to mention us that we should know, because we are bringing you here, but it's specifically just to make sure that we give the opportunity to the new generations to be part of this association, that it's, you integrate to the membership, and that we learn from you too, because there are some technical aspects that definitely our people in this association with 30-40 years of experience, they know about, but we can definitely learn about you and making sure that we have the best mentees and people working with us too. So Ashley, if there is any closing topic that you want to discuss?
So first, I just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity. It's, as a young professional, you don't get as many speaking engagements by yourself solo as you might like. So just being able to come out here and, talk about young professionals is a great experience and puts me out of my comfort zone a little bit. I'm not as good at just speaking engagements. So I try to make sure that if I get these opportunities, I'm going to try to better myself and get better at professional speaking. So I think for any young professionals out there, make sure you're going outside your comfort zone and, doing presentations, doing articles, learning more about valuation, learning more about the field, just getting out there.
Thanks, Dylan.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm also really honored to be here. Also to share the panel with Ashley, who is extremely more maybe qualified than I am. So it's really awesome to have the opportunity. But yeah, I I just say that I'm available if anybody at all is interested in what Baton is doing. I'm really happy to have a conversation. Maybe we can send my email out, but it's Dylan, my first name, at batonmarket.com. And also curious to get feedback on the platform. That's number one. And then number two, really quick plug. We're hiring for a role. We're signing up a lot of businesses to sell with us, and we need support on selling the businesses. So I'm trying to find somebody with some great finance experience who also has some customer service experience. So if anybody has somebody who could be a good fit, definitely let me know. And Ashley, if you're looking, also let me know.
I'll definitely connect with you just to get more insights, because it sounds like what you're doing is awesome. So we'll definitely
Thanks,
be.
Ashley. Great.
Oh, that was funny. That's, you know, that I'm laughing because I had an employee and he was one of the first 30 under 30 class. I nominated him and he wasn't working at that time with me. And then someone from an ACVA tried to recruit him. So it was very interesting, but it's good, right? You cannot be mad at people trying to grow. I think that's part of what we can. I think that is what we should feel, that we put something in that person that now is trying to grow. So we should be proud, even instead of being mad at people. So thank you both of you for being with us. And so I hope we can see you, if not this year, next year in one of the conferences, so we can talk to you. And I think we have your information on the presentation. So if everyone want to reach out, you have their information now. So thank you. Thank you for being with us.
Before they all go, it's so good to hear the energy, the excitement, and the perspective. This is coming from a boomer. I mean, enough of an age difference that my car insurance just told me to take a mature driver test to get a discount. So y'all, it's good to have you on board and on this journey.
Honored to be here, Mel. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Are you introducing next session, right, Mel?
Yeah, I am.
I think we have a video now, actually.
Oh, we do have a video. Yes, we do. Before we start the next session. All right. So good to have you all here. Now we're going to move into the next section, and I hope we get a chance to see a lot of you at the conference. I will be there. Alina will be there in Fort Lauderdale and everything. But the next segment with Alan Zipp and Michael Kaplan. This is one of the highlights always, to get a chance to talk with the judges in their insights, their knowledge, their wisdom, and everything. So I'm going to turn it over to Alan and let him introduce the panel of judges and take it from there.
Mel, I thank you. I cannot start my video. Somebody at your end has turned it off. So can you?
All right, let me see if I can fix that for you. Ask to start video. You should be good now.
Okay.
There you are, my friend.
Oh, good grief. I hope the judges are on. I don't see.
I see Judge Platt.
I don't see him. I guess my view is different.
Okay, says
Hello,
I can
Judge.
start my video. There you go.
Ah, there you are. Gotcha. Is Judge Driscoll going? There he is. All right, Judge. We are good to go. I'm going to share my screen somehow. There it is. And
go by the slides. What I would really like to do is put you guys back in the role of trial judge. And the issue today is trying to get into your thought process during the trial. Because if we have a trial and there are experts testifying, we know where there are differences of opinions. Otherwise, the case would have settled. So my thinking, and I would really like you to share, if you will, your insights during the trial when experts have differences of opinions. How do you see it? What thought process are you thinking about during the testimony? You know, it's really a point of view issue, and you both have different points of view, and I would really like to hear it. I'm going to skip over our biographical slides and let the group see it when they want to, but let me give you three thoughts up front. How do you consider these differences of opinions? What are you thinking at the time? How do you examine, well, potential biases? We heard about that today earlier with the Daubert questions. And do you examine the underlying reasons for the differences of opinions? Let me just throw these thoughts out and see what you all want to do with it. I've got other questions to follow.
So thank you so much. And as is tradition, Judge Platt always lets me answer the first question. And I'm not sure if that's, I'm not sure why that is, but he's been very much like that. And so is Judge Yates. I don't know if it's because of my incredible youth. But Alan, to start out with the assumption, for me to step back in the role as trial judge means I just have to step back to about 5 minutes or so before I got on this AVW segment, because that's what I do. I do some appellate work, but I am primarily a business court judge with a docket where the very issues that all of you who are joining us today are handling are the issues that I'm privileged to have in my court. So it isn't much of a leap. It isn't much of a leap at all. But I guess I start with the one point, the overall point, and that is, this is what we do. Whether it's experts disagreeing with something, whether it's fact witnesses disagreeing with something, whether it's there's a discrepancy between the documents and a witness, whether it's a discrepancy between documents, we are trained and paid to resolve those differences. So I guess I start with the point that whether it's a difference among experts or whether it's a difference among fact witnesses or a difference among any proof that comes before us, that's what we do. We resolve those differences. The initial question about bias, that's something that has become very, very prevalent in terms of awareness of the judges, and not explicit bias, but more implicit bias. And indeed, my jurisdiction has a jury instruction that we give to jurors on implicit bias, both at the beginning of the case and when they're deliberating. And obviously, those jury instructions are what we as judges need to keep in mind when we are the trier of fact. So I think we're very aware of our own biases. I hope we are aware as judges of our own biases, and thus we are aware of the potential biases that experts may have. But I guess I come back to I'd rather answer it generally at the beginning, and then I'd love to hear what Judge Platt says, because again, this is what we do. Discrepancy among fact witnesses is why we get up in the morning as judges and why we get excited about going to work.
Once again, Judge Driscoll has led out in a way that allows me to not think as much as I'd have to if I had to answer additionally. That said, the answer to the second question is has not yet adopted, although they're thinking about it, the type of instruction on implicit bias that New York has already done or has on what probably referred to as pattern instructions. We're particularly conscious of, particularly with implicit biases, that a jury who is suspicious generally of expert witnesses and whatever bias they might have when they get an instruction from a judge, as far as there's been some research that I guess we're fortunate. We may be one of the last institutionalized roles that are still respected in most quarters, but not by all. So what we tell the jury and how they should treat what their own biases in those instructions gets more attention than perhaps we think it will. And also we have to ask obviously we do consider the differences of opinion, as Judge Driscoll said. That's what we do. It's what we're trained to do, and it's what we're paid to do. And frankly, that's what we're educated to do. I'm reminded of an example. Right now, the role I'm playing, I do two kinds of judging. I come back to court, and I also do private arbitrations, which in effect are private judging. There's a little bit of difference, but not much in terms of how we treat experts, because we know that in an arbitration there is no jury. We're more liberal, both in applying Daubert and also in considering and so forth. But I'm reminded of a case that I recently did where the explanation and the answer to the third part of the screen is, does the judge examine the underlying reasons? I think we not only examine them, but it matters what they are. And it matters what the witness, the expert witness, testifies are the underlying reasons for the differences of opinion. It's one thing, and if that's the case, then the explanation makes a big difference. And the explanation is not just on credibility; it's also on. I have one insurance expert who basically said, "This is the way we've always done it, and that's why I did it."
Great. Let me give you some real specific differences. Just in concept, a lower capitalization rate will increase the value of the business, while a higher capitalization rate will decrease the value of the business. How do you evaluate the underlying support for the capitalization rate?
So Alan, I'm going to ask you to go even one step further with that hypothetical. Give me the business. Give me the business. I'm sorry but this is what we do as judges, right? We're used to asking the questions, not answering them. So forgive me if I could ask you to put even a finer point on it. Give me the business and give me a wildly different scenario, or just give us a little bit more.
Well, I was trying to be overview of this. Just take a pizza shop, and you've got an earnings figure, and so the expert comes up with what we call normalized earnings expected from the business. It's normalized, what we can expect that business to do. Now, when you apply a cost of capital, the rate of return that an investor would expect to get into this business, that's the number. That's the capitalization rate. That with, let's say, a 20% capitalization rate or a 30% capitalization rate. Now, those two numbers are realistic, and when you look at two experts, one at a 20% cap rate, one at a 30% cap rate, there's a difference in the value. And what I'm suggesting, or I'm asking for your your thoughts. How do you look at that? You say a 20% is too low, or 30% is too high. Or is there a difference? We split the difference. Do we look at Solomon?
Splitting the difference is so intellectually unsatisfying. And so that makes me cringe. That may be a settlement technique that we use when we're right at the end, but in the courtroom, that's not analytically worth anything. So I don't think splitting the difference is ever really the approach. And I asked for the hypothetical only to make the point that the differences of opinion on something as esoteric as cap rate. Now, cap rate is something that we do, something that I do regularly, something that Judge Platt does regularly, but it still is somewhat esoteric, right? We're still reconciling I've got expert one saying 20%, I've got expert two saying 30%. Okay, is expert one backing it up with better data for the 20% versus 30%? Is 20% because of the location? Is 20% because of the geography? Is 20% because of the business? I guess that's a long way of saying, Shannon Pratt, where are you? Shannon Pratt, where are you? Tell me, give me that. All right. So all of you should be channeling, all of you experts should be channeling your inner Shannon Pratt to really explain what that calculation that you've reached, whether it's cap rate, whether it's EBITDA, whatever it is, and take me through step by step. So I'll come back to, now I'll really answer your question, Alan, and that is that who has the more refined process and the more the process that makes sense to me, whether it's capitalization rate, whether it's normalized earnings, whatever it is, I want to make sure that process is making sense. And so I would suggest to anyone that when you're testifying, you know this stuff so well. The judge, even expert judges like, or I'm not going to say I'm an expert, but even experienced judges like myself and Judge Platt, who deal with things like cap rate and EBITDA on a regular basis, still take us through step by step. And because most of your testimony will be before the judge in a bench trial, if the judge wants you to move on, she'll say, hey, could you move on? I think I got that. But don't be afraid to take it step by step. When there are holes in the logic, don't assume that we know how you want to fill them in. So I think the answer I'd say is whoever is more complete and cohesive in their testimony has a better chance of carrying the day.
And that is the answer. And it's also that matters when we say we're in a courtroom doing what? If we're evaluating a case and we're the fact finder, that's one thing. If we're mediating, and we're not mediating in a courtroom normally, but if that's what we're doing, then the intellectual dissatisfaction is not as dissatisfying simply because that's what we're doing. So we're evaluating risk, which you're going to get to later if I read correctly. But so if we're evaluating risk, that's one thing. If we're doing what these questions asked, which is evaluating, that's a different function. And the RIV expert needs to recognize and distinguish them and make it clear to the experienced judge or even the inexperienced judge, more so, frankly, than that is what he or she is doing. They understand that, and here's what went into it. I had a case, and I'll give you an example. Art, okay? There was a loss. One expert says, this is the formula we use. It's historically correct. Says who, okay? He didn't explain that. The other side said, I hired the foremost expert in the world on art, on the value of art. And he's here, and and that witness testified to intricate details of how he had evaluated the loss. I don't know enough to know. All I know is I was a whole lot more impressed with the methodology that the expert used, that the art expert used, than I did with the historical basis that was given to me for the alternative view.
That's a great conclusion, that formulas don't speak for themselves and that experts do. Let's move to the risk question, like business risk. I point out here that it's a very subjective element of the cap rate. And the higher the business risk, the lower the value of the business. Well, what do you consider when one expert applies a very large value to business risk while the other applies a substantially lower value to business risk in developing that cap rate? What do you look for on supporting these views?
One of the key things, obviously, is what kind of business is it, and is it inherently risky? So, Alan, your hypothetical about the pizza shop. Well, I'm in suburban Long Island, so pizza shops perhaps could be risky if they don't make pizza. In other words, I'm going to sound like a Northeasterner. If somebody makes something called deep dish, that might be a little more risky than standard New York style pizza. And I say that with a smile on my face, even though I love Chicago pizza. because I'm looking to the business itself and what I might know about the business itself. And can you explain that the business itself is risky if you are, if you're picking a certain cap rate, or isn't risky if you're picking a certain cap rate? And again, explain why. Don't, as you said so eloquently, Alan, formulas don't speak for themselves, experts do. So tell me why you're ascribing a certain level of risk to that business. And to put it on a way that our dear friend Judge Yates, who couldn't join us today, has always said, tell us a story about that. We as Michael Kaplan always says, you're the storyteller. Tell the story why this pizza place in this strip mall in suburban Long Island, where 100,000 cars pass by every day, is suddenly a high-risk venture. Is it because of the style of pizza? Is it because no one else makes pizza like that elsewhere? What are you comparing it to? And I see that one of the comments in the chat is so well stated. Again, compare it to the companies that are similar to you, or say that there are nothing similar, and thus it's inherently more risky. Or if you can find something similar, that something similar is inherently risky.
And the expert who can explain his or her opinion by including the nature of the risk and the source of the risk. Where'd the risk come from? The risk of what? That explains the opinion, as well as the nature of this. Then what risk are we talking about? That the place is going to burn down, that you're going to lose all your employees, that they're going to get sick, that they're going to strike? What? And what's the cause of the source of that risk? And I think, what time frame are we talking about? If we're talking about a time frame, are we talking about general risk that exists in forever, universally and forever, or is it because this is 2023 or 24, and here's the risk and here's what's going on, and that does cause the risk to be higher than it would be if that wasn't going on? All of that detail is persuasive.
Great. Thank you.
Anything the lack of detail, if the explanation is the lack of the detail is in order to make it, the old saying, keep it simple, stupid. Well, sometimes it's better not to. Because we're shrinking from complexity. And if that's what we're doing, and we're sitting there as judges, we're not shrinking from complexity. And the longer we're on the bench, the more complex, the more we recognize that things are more complicated than they seem to be at the time.
Judge Driscoll, you had a point.
The only point I want to make is that the question of risk is something that has obviously changed quite dramatically. Our understanding of risk has changed quite dramatically over the last 3 years due to world events. So I think it would be very important, regardless of the industry, regardless of the published data that may be out there, to account for the reality of how whatever the pizza place or the tool and die shop or the dry cleaner, how that has been affected throughout COVID. Because again, that was a singular event, a once in a century event, right? Since the last pandemic of 1918. And certain businesses weathered it, certain prospered, certain stayed the same. I think it would be important to account for that very real world scenario. And again, a la the point about us being storytellers, it really tells us how the business exists with a real world risk that we've all been living through, whether personally or professionally, and how the business may have dealt with that.
Right. Let me run a couple of other items through. Pass-through entities, LLCs, S corporations, partnerships, do not pay taxes at the business entity level. By reducing the earnings for a hypothetical tax, that will reduce the value of the business. How does the trial judge consider business value where one expert will tax affect these earnings and the other does not?
Well, you got to tax affect the earnings, if they're not taxed at the entity level, which, as you point out, of course, they're not. Then you've got to recognize how they're going to be taxed. I think at the individual level, just to show how this affects real people. I think I'd like to know, what happens at the end of the day with this valuation. That said, if both didn't do it, I'm comparing apples to apples. If one did it and one didn't, I think I would ask each expert, all right, give me the part that's missing. If you discounted because of tax consequences, put that, get rid of that discount. And to the expert who did discount, all right, or did not discount, all right, let's discount it so I can compare one set of apples to another set of apples and one set of oranges to another set of oranges. But I'd always like to know the real world effect here of whatever I'm doing. And if we don't account for taxes, we're not accounting for the real world. So I guess that to really answer your question, Alan, I'd like to see both on your report. I'd like to see both the assumption of the business qua business, because again, we don't know what the individual is paying and as a tax base, but then assume a tax rate of whatever, 24% or 32% or whatever you'd like, just to show the real world effect.
Judge Platt, your thoughts?
Same thoughts, without repeating them, since we don't have unlimited amount of time.
Yep.
But in a nutshell, I think I would just simply say that the explanation, once again, the explanation for why the difference in this situation, when this is the issue, and the difference is because of the way that this information is being, the real world consequences, that matters. And frankly, how articulate the expert is in doing that is going to matter a lot.
Good point. Let me get one more. Personal goodwill may not be an asset of the corporation, and it may not be considered marital property in a divorce. What does the judge consider when one expert applies a large value to personal goodwill while the other expert applies no value or a very low value to personal goodwill?
I think that's one where I'm looking to what the governing law is. It's been, it's been over 14 and a half years since I last did a matrimonial case. So I'm not quite sure of the current state of the matrimonial laws in New York. But I think I'm going to come back to that other point about tax, Alan, and that is, give me both numbers. Give me the goodwill number and don't give me the goodwill number. So again, at least I can compare the apples to apples. The expert who did not address goodwill, I might ask them on the fly, just amend your report. Just give me a sense of goodwill. Tell me where that variable would be, assuming that the law permits me to consider goodwill. As you point out, Alan, in many jurisdictions, in matrimonial cases, it's not to be considered. To the extent I can consider it, I'd like to at least have an input for it.
Once again, if the disagreement, as Judge Driscoll just said, if the disagreement is legally based, no, in other words, we didn't evaluate it because we can't, in our view, then that's one thing. If the answer is, but I think there are lots of judges, and this is a case where you're going to have a family division judge in many states that have family divisions. They're looking to be what's fair, and the opinion is that makes sense and seems fair is going to be difficult to defeat if the judge, which in the family law case is always the fact finder, is convinced that that they agree with the one opinion that an unfair result will occur. If that's what's going to happen, then get ready to really have a very serious problem defending that type of an opinion.
Well done. Michael Kaplan wants to come on and he's got a piece that follows this. So let me just summarize something. As an expert, it is our job to tell you why we believe whatever it is we believe, why we take a large discount or a small discount, that the more detail, the more support we have, the more you as a judge will have as a basis to make a decision. Is that fair?
Well said, Alan. Thank you.
Yeah.
Please testify with that level of clarity anytime you're in my courtroom.
I look forward to it. Michael, why don't you take your segment now and for the judges?
Thank you. I just want to add, I want to thank each of our judges. I mean, you are always great in these sessions and you're very enlightening. And what I find is that as an expert, when I walk into the courtroom and I'm sworn in as an expert, certainly from that point on, my client in the courtroom is the trier of fact, the judge or the jurors. I am there, and we are there as experts to assist the triers of fact in understanding the evidence. That's why we're there. We already know what the other guy's opinion is. We've seen the other experts' report. We're intimately familiar with our report, and hopefully we become intimately familiar with the other experts' report. Our job as experts, if we want to be persuasive on the witness stand, one of the things I do as matter of course is I address what the other expert did and address how I considered the other expert's assumptions and which ones I accepted, which ones I rejected, and why I rejected them. I considered the other expert's methodology and address why I found that appropriate or why I rejected it. And I go through those areas where I differ with the other expert. I use my judgment as to how much to address it and how to work it into my testimony, how I work it into the story. But I want that trier of fact to understand that I've considered all of this stuff. My number is different from the other guy's number, not because I just went off in a different direction and I ignored all this stuff. I considered it. We have to be thorough as experts. And then when we do that, we've got to be able to tell a story. Judge Driscoll talked about telling a story. Judge Platt talked about telling a story. And we know Judge Yates always expects a story from the expert. And we are storytellers. We are there to talk to people who don't live their life in the world of business valuation. They're not, it's not part of each and every day. Certainly in terms of preparing valuations, or certainly in terms of damages studies, whatever it is, we are the technical experts. We have to explain the logic of it. So we have to recognize that we are experts. We speak in real world terms, in terms of real world experiences that the trier of fact can relate to. And explain how we were thorough, how we considered everything, how what we've done is more logical. And remember, we as experts are there to persuade the trier of fact to embrace our opinion, because ours is the more logical, the more thorough, the more well thought out. And it's the one that provides the answer to the case. I can go on for a lot longer now, but I know my time is up. Thank you very much. And in particular, thank you, Judge Platt. Thank you, Judge Driscoll. And these are always great sessions.
Thank you, Kaplan, and thank you to all the judges and to our correspondent, that's Alan Zipp today. So we are going to go to our last session, is today's last session, and we are going to have with us Mark Kucik. Everyone know him already, and he is going to be talking about industry standards updates, specifically to the professional standards that are going to be or are applicable to engagement accepted after June 1st, 2023. Mark, how are you? Great seeing you. I cannot hear you for some reason.
How about now?
Yeah, now it's perfect.
Great to see you too, Alina. It's a great thing when we all get together for a moment. I'd like to share with you all a little bit of an update on what's happening with your professional standards from NACVA. As you know, there is a brand new set of standards effective June 1 of 2023. I'll go through a couple of the nuances and what changed as we go forward. But I really like to show you what's happening on our NACVA website. If you go to nacva.com, you'll see that we have the professional standards also located on the actual website, as always. But now it's kind of expanded a little bit, right? We have our current professional standards, and then we have the historical standards that we had before. The one thing that's really nice to know about is the current professional standards has 2 documents here. And this is the brand new side that's exciting for all of us. The NACBA current professional standards effective June 1, 2023 are right here and present, and you just click on them and you'll have the entire process of what's happening here with the new set of standards, right? But then also, if you go in here, you have the GACVAs, and you might ask what that's all about, right? Well, we're happy to tell you that the GACVA standards is identical to the NACBA standards. However, that brand new document now for global associations of certified valuers and analysts is now available. You'll see that there's a preclude to the GACVA standards and why they're here, what they're for. And it's really about the international chapters and giving them the ability to understand that we have another vehicle for them and their standards. One thing that's going to happen with the GACVA standards is footnotes on a country-by-country basis. NACVA has taken the leadership role in this area. Instead of trying to water down all of the standards around the world to fit into one envelope, we know that that's not true. So we still have our particular set of NACVA standards, right? And they're still principle-based standards, not rule-based standards. However, this will give guidance to each of the chapters around the world. And by country-specific scenarios, they're drafting footnotes that are going to go to the GACVA professional standards, giving guidance around the world on a country-by-country basis for all of the additional standards that each country may have to bear above and beyond the NACVA standards to give them pure guidance when they're doing their work, not only in the United States, but also what's happening now worldwide. And being a leader in this area and really helping them generate that capability gives you the ability to state how you are now part of an organization that is given leadership around the world. It is going to expand the quality and expand the direction for all of the CVAs, whether they're around the Global Association or around the NACVA standards. Now, the one thing that both have in common here that is new is if you take a look at the NACVA standards and you go all the way to the glossary section, the glossary section has now been removed from the international standards as well as the North American standards. The international glossary is now referenced into 2 documents that we have on our website as you go to the professional standards. And if you take a look, you'll see here that we have the comparison charts, and we also have glossary and valuation terms. The NACBA Standards Committee has gone to great lengths to looking at each one of these different individual charts. And when you take a look at the glossary of the appraisal terms, they're mapped out exactly as the Mays documents were drafted really on in the beginning. So when you take a look now, you have the International Glossary of Appraisal Terms. You take a look, and each one of the organizations now is listed on top with their current definition of any of the terms that are currently in effect as of their standards or through their websites. So if in fact they in tune added more documents, more words, more terms to their standards, they're listed here as well. So you now have a complete scenario of all of the different language, all of the different terms, all the glossary issues, not only from NACVA, but USPAP, ASA, AICPA, the International Glossary, as well as going through the international side and bringing in also the entire section from the each one of the RICs and the Canadians as well. And as you go through that process, you take a look at each one of the different charts. You have here the different international terms. These are the ones that are coming through the IVSC, RICs, and the Canadian Institute, right? So you have literally all of the professional organizations that are credentialing individuals now available to give you the terms at which you now can use throughout your booking of your reports. I highly suggest you use the definition as it's stated, but also reference that within your document, within your report, so that people don't have to go find them. But as a result, the glossary has been expanded into a much bigger, a much better scenario for all of you, that's given you direction as to the new terminology on a consistently updated basis. That's no different than when you take a look at the actual charts themselves, and you see that we have the comparison charts on each of the individual standards that are also available to you. The first one here being the domestic with USPAP, ASA, and AICPA, and how those are then referenced against the NACVA standards, giving you another tool that is invaluable to be able to take a look at integrity and objectivity, for example, not only across the North American site, but also to do it domestically and worldwide, because we have the international chart as well. And the international chart here also has the IVSC, RICS, and the Canadian Institutes as well from a standards position. So, Alina, we have a lot more data now for you to be able to be in compliance. Mike Gregory was talking a little bit about Rule 702, and if you follow the standards, you'll be just fine. Well, the standards have just expanded a little bit for you. We've given you more tools than you've ever had before to make sure you're in full compliance of what's happening inside of not only here, but what's happening across the entire valuation community. These have all been updated as recent as, I believe, June or July. If you go to the effective dates, I know that there's going to be an update that's coming up on USPAP, I believe, but you can see the effective dates are always here on the bottom of the chart, so that you can always tell what particular IVSC or RICS or Canadian Institute that's been referenced, what document that you're looking at and what it was referenced to. So you never have to worry about whether or not you're in the right place at the right time. Everything is always referenced with an effective date at the bottom of the international glossaries on the Maze documents. So you always have that ability to take a look. This new approach has been put in place. If you have standards that you need, we also have the previous edition of the standards and the comparison charts. So just make sure that you take a look for all the historical documents. They're all still here. So that if you're looking at a valuation report that was done prior to this date, make sure you're looking at the standards that are applicable to the document which was created at that moment in time. It's pretty hard to hold people accountable to standards that weren't in effect at the time that the document was written, right? So just make sure that you have the appropriate standards, the appropriate Maze document, the appropriate dates that correspond to the assignment at which you're looking for. It's all here, it's all available to you, and it's very easy for you to find. And I think that NACVA has done an outstanding job putting these new tools for our membership together and having a great capability for you to have this, be able to come forward and use this information on a regular basis. On a regular basis, NACVA puts out the standards report. It's a 2-hour session on understanding the industry standards. I do a lot of those particular reviews. Feel free to join us for a couple of hours, and we'll teach you how not only to stay compliant with those particular standards, but how you use those on a daily basis to help enhance your business and to make your business grow by utilizing these standards and making sure that as you do that, you're in full compliance. And we welcome all of you to join us on a couple of 2-hour session, and we'll make it worthwhile. We don't sit and read the standards to you. I believe that you can read those on your own, but we're going to teach you how to apply them effectively and efficiently to help you grow your business and be in compliance. Alina, any other questions?
No questions. I was looking at let me see. There is a question about how the NACVA report checklist been updated to. If so, where do we locate them?
Yeah, the checklists are all being done as we speak, and all of those are going to be updated, and everything is going to come. The Q&As are being updated as well. So everything is full force forward, and hopefully we'll give you everything that you need to be successful.
Great. Larry just mentioned that you are doing a session tomorrow on standards, just to make sure everyone knows that's what you mentioned. So she's reminding us that. So thank you, Mark. I don't think we have any more questions right now. I'm going to launch the last polling question, so make sure you all respond to that. And those of you who haven't registered for our conference in December, make sure you do so. We're going to be in Fort Lauderdale. So if you live in a cold place, it's a great time to go to Fort Lauderdale during that time of the year. So it's a great time to do network, chat with us. Mel is going to be there too. And to have you CPEs and enjoying the sun. So, but we are going to see you next month.
Next month.
Yeah.
I would like to say one thing to the judge. I am from Chicago, and I'm telling you, Chicago deep dish pizza is much better than New York. So let's have a conversation.
That's great. But after that, we are also having, we're going to have our conference, and we have 2 days in the mornings. We have our AVW show in the mornings, the days of the conferences, but also we are going to have our monthly show on December 18th at the same time. So hopefully see you next month, everyone.